Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our program focusing on the history of Raynham. I'm Pat Riley and our host is retired Selectman Don McKinnon. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Patricia. We always have a good time here.
We always find something to talk about.
And we've got one thing to start us off is because you are chairperson of the school committee and I am a retired whatever it is. I've got a sign on my lawn that says vote no on question number 2.
Election's coming up very, very soon.
Another week.
It's not, it always used to be the first Tuesday in November, Don, and this time it's the second Tuesday.
Must have to do with something to do with the calendar, Pat.
Probably, but in any case,
You've
it's
been more than
November
patient with
8th.
those calendar people.
It's November 8th,
I
and
know.
election's always important. As Don said, we have a presidential election.
We just hope
have some
whoever is
questions.
elected is shown respect. And whoever is elected, they choose not to be a problem for 4 years of the first term of whoever wins it one way or the other.
I always hope,
It's almost
Don,
like they can't do that anymore, Pat.
Yeah, I know. I always hope that whoever is elected sort of grows into the position that when they have that awesome responsibility, they rise above. So
yeah.
we're hoping whoever it is rises.
And we hope that, see, I hear the way people are talking about each candidate. And, of course, I myself might have said one thing or another, which I really didn't mean. And but I look at 2 candidates running for president. I look at one of them is going to be our president for 4 years. And if you choose to dedicate your life to bad-mouthing whoever that is for the next 4 years, my advice to you is get a life. There's more important things to do for you. I'm sure you've got more important things to do than hate people. Hate is an energy. There are people that actually hate these 2 candidates. And that's the first time I remember that.
They seem to have pulled out such strong emotions and many negative, as you
Well,
say.
Self-praise is no praise, so I might as well have no praise. I've said last year this time, I said, the Democrats promise you things they can't deliver, and the Republicans character assassinate. And if you go back over historically, Michael Dukakis in the tank, they make fun of Mike Dukakis in a tank. He served in the service. He might have been in a tank for all you know. Who are you to make fun of him? That's what they defame people.
Do you know he was in Taunton recently?
I know he
Speaking
was
about
there
the
on
rail
railroad.
project. Don, I have to ask you,
Yeah.
because there's like 2 communities that are opposed, I guess, to the Stoughton line.
There's probably 3.
Okay. They said 2.
Well, 2, that's true,
Yeah.
because we took a vote and basically said, whatever happens, happens, because we know it's going to happen. So they took that, both sides took that as a vote for themselves.
Okay.
The 2 communities are Easton and Stoughton, and it's called the Stoughton route.
Yeah.
Well, when this first happened, the railroad, Jim DuPont and I were down in Taunton High School to find out about the Mansfield route. That's what it was, the Mansfield route. But come to find out, to be the old route, which was the Mansfield route, you had to go through many streets in the city of Taunton. I don't blame Taunton.
Right.
They said, we don't want that. That's okay for 1880, but not now. We got cars and things like that. So then they got the Stoughton route. Well, they came through originally with $350 million for the Stoughton route. You know what it is now? It's more like $2 billion,
Yeah.
350. So the route has entirely changed. And so when they did this, I often thought, and I don't have anyone in this race, so I'm not taking sides one way or the other. There is, and by the time this shows, it'll be just about the election time. There is a spirited representative race in the city of Taunton. There is a young lady that's been there, I believe, 3 terms. There's a young lady that's been a council person, and she's been there for several terms in the council, and they are going at each other in a spirited way. The irony of the situation is, as I understand it, they're both in favor of the Stoughton route.
Really?
But guess what? They represent a full precinct, as I understand it, in a little town called Easton.
Ooh.
So now both of those candidates, if they're fair, have to go to the town of Easton if it isn't too much trouble, since you're going to be their rep. And they're going to have to say why they think a railroad through their historical district and the Hockomock Swamp is a pretty good idea, right through the center of Easton. Easton is made official votes, and as you said, there's two communities. One of them is Easton. So both those represent. Now, the reason I can say it is it's a wash. Both of them want to get that precinct vote, obviously.
Sure,
It could
sure.
decide the election. And both of them are for the railroad to their town. I would love to be a fly on the wall because I wouldn't go up and see that.
Now, Raynham originally was opposed, one of the communities opposed.
Oh, we've
right?
always been opposed to it.
What was the
Pat.
reasoning, Don?
Well, because what happens with the state, and partly my doing, I like the state. I love the state of Massachusetts. Wouldn't live anywhere else. But I don't trust the state. When they say they're going to give you X number of dollars, don't take that to the bank. And so they say the train's going to come through and it's really not going to cost you anything. Well, what you have to do now if you want to work your budget is get to the inner bowels of the state budget. And when they send money down to these towns, Middleborough's one, Bridgewater's another, that have a train, they subtract a subsidy. Those towns subsidize the railroad. And I'm looking and I'm saying, we're 15 minutes away from the train in Bridgewater.
Right, right.
It's supposed to be for the Commonwealth of Mass, so we can get to that train. Now, what's the other train route if they went to Raynham? To a track that's the best state's doing is putting the track out of business. That's where the stop in Raynham's going to be. So if you live in South Raynham, you're about 20 minutes away from the train, which is then going to come through Raynham, but the only stop will be up near a track that the state is putting out of business. So, one, the stop's not to our advantage. Two, why would we want to pay that extra money?
Right.
Then again, we have the busy 138, and
would be
they were
several
going to go
crossings,
underneath. They
yeah.
originally were going to tunnel. They're not tunneling anymore because they had it underwritten that the number wasn't correct. So I'm biased, I admit. I don't think any of the selectmen are for it, but I don't know. I'm not speaking for them, but we were never for it as a group, the selectmen for the train. The train did not give us a service. See, I think in 2016, a train is okay to go from A to B like Boston to New York. It should be on a speed line, and it should go at excessive speeds of over 100 miles an hour. You can do this in every other country except us. Japan, they do it. Germany, they do it. Italy, they do it. In the United States, they don't do it. So the train meanders towards New York. And I think it could be a 21st century solution to get from A to B. It certainly would save people from going to Logan Airport, which is really a bother. So I'm not against railroads per se.
Right.
But the nickel and dime railroads I'm against. I think they should have bus lines. They should have areas where they can widen. As a matter of fact, a representative, and I forget his name naturally, but I think he comes from Somerset, I'll say.
Okay.
He's the one who wants to come down the Middleborough route. And when you mentioned the Governor Baker came, and he's in favor of the Middleborough route.
Really?
All the local officials in Taunton, New Bedford, and Fall River are for the Stoughton route. So down comes Baker and says, this is a great idea. Well, it'll be a 15-minute more ride, and a ride that already takes almost an hour. So now you're going to go an hour and 15, bring your lunch. And then at the end of the and then, by the way, here's the other thing about the railroad. By the time the railroad lands in its south station, not the north now, south, if you work in the government center or you work in the entertainment section, you can walk. But anybody else has to then get on the subway. So you've been on the train for an hour or so, maybe 15. And if it went the Middleborough route, you'd get on it in Taunton, you'd go 15 minutes over to Middleborough where you'd start. Now you start and you go up again. So by the time you get there, it's an hour and 15. Now you have to get on a subway to get to wherever you work. Otherwise, what are you doing on that train? You got to get out to, or you're not going to hire a cab every day, certainly. So the cab is something which could be, but I mean, think of the expense of a cab. So that's the reason it doesn't make sense in the 21st century local railroad service. It just doesn't. And the other thing is, I've talked, and some of my best friends, Pat, are for the railroad, and I've talked to them. And each time I talk to them, I say, oh, by the way, are you going to use the train? Well, I have flexible hours. Oh, I know that. And so, therefore, I can't, that schedule, because, see, there's so few people take the train, they can't put a regular, they talk about the old days. In the old days, that train left every 15 minutes. Now, 2 may go in the morning, 2 may come back at night, don't get sick in town. And so it isn't practical. It isn't, they proved 80 years ago, when they tried to take over the railroad, that the railroad was not solvent for passenger service. It's solvent. To this day, Pat, do you hear the train? I still hear the train, and I'm on Richmond Street. That train is in Taunton. And it goes
occasion.
beep, 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 beep. It has to, by law, stop and make sounds. Imagine if you live near it. So, and when your car gets caught, you realize, you say, wait a minute now, how many cars are there? 50, 60, 80 cars? That train meanders through the city of Taunton now. So there's a train to Taunton now. They don't want to talk about that train because they know if a train comes down, it's got to make a lot of noise. Now, they don't make noise, but there's noise
Associated with it, right, yeah.
Pat, do you want to talk about charter schools, because you are one of the 3 experts in Raynham on charter schools?
No, not really. I will just say that the school committee did vote on it last night.
And voted?
It was a split vote. We voted.
Split vote?
Well, it wasn't unanimous, let's put it that way.
Wow.
We had 1 abstention, 1 vote. Well, actually, there was a resolution. One of the members, Mr. Dolan, Michael Dolan, brought a resolution to vote no, the resolution. And he outlined several, reasons that are you've heard in the argument for voting no. And then the vote to support the resolution, which would be a vote no on the question. There was one person opposed to that one, abstaining, and the rest voted in favor of no vote.
No vote.
No vote. I know, it was kind of crazy because you support this means no, you don't support
Yeah.
it means yes.
Yeah, I know,
one of
I
those
know.
things. But and it is true that there is, I think, about $108,000 right now that comes out of the Bridgewater Raynham school budget that goes to charter schools. And the argument that...
and many of, and I did ask one person who, get these phone calls, I said, who pays for these buses? And they said, federal grants. So the grant money that comes in from the federal government, which that's another debate, whether the federal government should get itself involved in education, because many of the leading politicians in the country come from states where the education is bad. It's, no wonder they want charter schools. It's bad. That's the state that should have charter schools. What is it about Massachusetts, the MCAS? Now, I've argued that for more years than I was active, and I haven't been active since 1998. I said about the charter schools, if you put me on that committee, I'll mix up Revere and Dover. So I'll have Dover failing and Revere doing great, and then Dover will explain why. So what I'm saying is that the schools that are doing poorly, let's say, whose fault is that?
Well,
and they're out to blame the local school committee, aren't they? It's the town's fault.
Yeah.
And that isn't so, by the way.
Right. But one would think that, and obviously there are, public schools aren't perfect, and, there's much more that can be done, but put the funding, the resources into the existing public schools.
I'm going
Instead of
to
taking money away from them.
I'm going to break the
create
bubble.
basically private schools.
That it is
They're
a
private schools, they're
It's
publicly
a small
funded.
school. They want to be a small private school is what they want. And they say this what, 30,000 or something, or some very large number of people. And for this, of course, it puts the politicians in a bind because there's thousands of people that want to go to the charter schools. Now, our own Representative DeLeo, I think he's from Everett, he came out in favor of charter schools now, even though he, and I've met the guy. David Flynn at a function, and the real connected people were at David's table, and this
Right.
guy and I, Kathy, my wife, and I, and the guy next to me, he wasn't yet powerful, and his name was DeLeo. He is now the Speaker of the House, the most powerful man next to the governor in the Commonwealth of Mass. And we talked for a couple hours, maybe more. Very nice guy. But now he's claiming he is for them, even though there may be a political price to pay. Well, there isn't a political price for him to pay. He's in a district where I'm sure he hasn't had an opponent for 20 years now. So, but anyway, okay, nice guy though, so I don't want to badmouth him. I guess I did a little bit, didn't I? I tend to do that. Get back to the charter school now. Here's where they actually, I don't like to use the word lie because I don't want it used on me. So let's say they haven't quite got the right information. They are saying if you want your son or daughter who's in a system where that student isn't reading to grade level, not doing well, then if you don't have that, then you're okay, stay where you are. But you will tell us, no, staying where you are now, you're taking money out of your system. But let's just say, okay, well, Mr. Governor, who's now on TV, and he's another nice guy. That's why people vote for nice people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Baker's a nice man. 6'5", he's like Michael's size, you know. And he's good looking and he's well spoken and he's a nice guy. And he's going house to house now, bang bang, and pushing for charter schools. And he said, if you got a system that's going pretty good, okay. But if you're in a system that isn't, well, let me tell you about charter schools. I'm going to give you the little closest example because that's what Boston doesn't get. They don't, Pat, the biggest loss in the Commonwealth of Mass in the last 40 years, let's say, 40, is the fact that newspapers were almost or are going out of business.
Really.
As a result, and you were a reporter at one time, and as what's happened is that, well, take the Raynham Selectmen. There's no one here to cover today. Let's adjourn. When I was elected in '73, Pat, reporter from the Enterprise, reporter from the Gazette, a reporter from station WPEP, the radio station.
Linda Bellinger.
Linda Bellinger, and her father was the legend of something.
Eddie Litchfield.
Yeah, and see, you.
Ah.
And you were one of the reporters too at one time, I know that. But so now we have no reporters covering it
right,
whatsoever.
right.
So there's no one to cover these things to find out what's going on. So the reason I'm saying that is people, if you, and here's the problem with the Enterprise, they took one of the best reporters away from the Gazette, Mark LaRocque, who is a good reporter. He's now up at the Enterprise. And down the street from here is the editor of the Enterprise. So the Raynham has representation in a fashion. The people who decide on charter schools decided on Brockton. That's a school in need, they tell you. So then they also had to have three. So they took Randolph, and they took Taunton. And Randolph has some trouble, but Taunton says, why are you selecting me? Well, we needed a third school. Oh, I think there's 5 or 7 people coming from Taunton. I don't know whether there's 6 or 7 coming from Randolph, and 300 and some coming from Brockton. I think you probably know the history of it, do you? Have you followed that a little bit? I'm sure you have. They went to move in downtown. This was going to be one of the things to get the downtown going. And so they were going to do it in a building where they rent tuxedos and they have a placement service for people of sorts. So they discontinued the placement. They kept the tuxedo. And they're going to move 300 and some students from Brockton into this building. And September is when you start your school year.
Right.
This was around April or May, June. Wait a minute. They can't get this building to pass code. I'm not talking about what you had to go through to build these buildings.
Right.
I'm talking about
Just
code.
simple building code.
Electrical inspector come in. So they had to get away from there. So what did they do? Now they're, so much for downtown Brockton. Now they're up the street. They're going from 190 up to 1,012, something 100, North Main Street in Brockton. It was the former home of Verizon. What would that have to do with schools? So now there's 300 and some people come to Verizon. And the building inspector goes in. They never called. They said, well, we thought everything was okay. Oh, well, there's some things that are lacking. What would that be? Electricity would be something.
Sort of basic. Yeah.
Sanitary. The walls aren't secure enough for that type of situation. And what did the people who are running the charter school say? The city of Brockton is out to block us. The guy's doing his job. That's his job to do that. So anyway, they can't go there. And so then they admit they can't do it. Do you know where they are now, Pat, those students? In a little town called Norwood. Now, Norwood is about, people say, why are you talking about it? I'm trying to explain to you how out of control
Yes, right.
the leadership of charter school is, and yet they want more on the plate. They've got charter schools they haven't built, you know, because they haven't done that. And now they want, I think it's 12 more, something like that, a year forever. And so, and they want you to vote for 12 more. They have 90, I believe, or 80 some charter schools in Massachusetts. They previously had well over 100, but they failed. You don't hear about the failures. They failed. Now they get on a bus, and that's why I said, who pays for that bus? Well, the grant money that would go to your school, Raynham, Bridgewater, Raynham, Taunton, BR, that now goes to buses to get those kids from Brockton to Norwood, which is 22 miles, half-hour ride, 300 and some kids. I don't know how many buses that would be, but quite a few buses, every morning. And they're supposed to get the building in Brockton up to code, I believe, within the next 3 to 4 months. You see, this is where, and the reason I mentioned about newspapers not having the staff, they covered every moment in Brockton. Since then, I get the Enterprise, since then, not one day of coverage. Why? They're in Norwood. They don't have a reporter to send out to do what?
Yeah.
So there lies the. I don't know whether that. I said in a meeting that they should take these spotlight teams that are catching Willie Lump Lump, who leaves 5 minutes early from work, and for Channel 5, we got 3 of them. Take them and let them look up those 80 buildings.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to bet you, Pat, you remember when we had the committee, and I was on the committee to build the high school. It took years to build that high school, and the state was on top of us about everything. And now they're moving into a tuxedo store, or they're moving into a Verizon store, or they're going off to Norwood rather, and they know not what. I never heard of anything about Norwood. I have no idea what's going on out there. My point is, and this is the kicker, the governor of the Commonwealth, who everybody looks and plain-spoken Charlie, some regular guy, is telling you that these kids who don't read to grade level need to have a jump start in what he's advocating, the charter schools. Well, are they singling out students who have difficulty in reading? Are they singling out handicap or special needs? Are they language? No, it's a lottery. Now, you people who buy tickets to lotteries, you know you always win. You buy a lottery ticket, you're going to win. You know you never win, do you? You look at your and you lose your lottery. where does the governor and people like that have the audacity to say, we're going to take care of those students who are challenged? Pat, tell us about the special
Actually,
needs.
that doesn't really happen either, because some of the reasons the charter schools do as well as they do is because they don't include those students. I think that there are several public schools, not to mention any in particular, that have students, parents that have called. My children were involved in a charter school. They can't handle their special needs, so they're sending them back to the other
Back to the
public
school of which
school.
they've already lost their funding. So as you look at what they're saying they're delivering,
Right.
I just wonder, how do they sleep at night? How do they look into a camera like this and say, if your child cannot read, no, you don't know in the lottery whether that child is included or not. And if the child, and here's the other thing, and of course, I know it's an old school teacher, because he's an old school teacher. Well, let me tell you something. I was a business major. So therefore, I had how many education courses? So I had to be certified to teach in the school systems. And I'm turning a guy in, he's passed, so I won't give his name. But I went over to a certain local college and asked for courses I need to be certified. The fellow gave me 3 courses to take. Come to find out, they were friends of his who were having trouble getting enough numbers to have a class. And Donnie McKinnon, in his infinite wisdom, went to those classes. And I got my B or A, whatever you have to get, in a graduate's class, because I already had my degree. And when I went to get hired, where I worked in the city of Taunton, I proudly showed the superintendent those classes. He said, "Oh, they're very good classes." He said, "It's nothing to do with certification." So back I went, and I had to take 3. Now, it was only 5 classes as a full workload. I had to take 3 classes at night beside the school I'm teaching. Besides, I kept a part-time job because I wanted to do something called groceries. And so here I am taking 3 courses towards certification, and I am certified. Charter school doesn't call for certification.
They say they're going to revise that and change, but
Sure they are. You just wonder. I don't mind, because I tell people this and they believe me or not. That's just a matter of fact. I've been on both sides of that table. Well, I've been a member of the union from 1969 till 98. But I never, ever negotiated a contract. But I was friends with people who were. So I was very much involved in the discussion of it. But as a management person in the executive branch, I negotiated contract for police, fire, highway, clerical, you name it. They appealed and took me into Boston and taught me a lesson or 2. Yeah, I had plenty of battles with unions. Don't tell me I didn't. People who know me know I did. And I'm, but so here they are, the people in power. I don't have to say the party because we all know who they are. They're anti-union. And unfortunately for the teachers, they're a member of a union. And there are a couple of charter schools that are unionized. And what I'm out to, and I tell this on another broadcast, Pat. Put it in an envelope and sign it, because Donnie McKinnon won't be here at the time. But I'll be on Pleasant Street. That'll be a capacity of 4. They will take the day, if they get their yes on the vote, they will rule the day, because when they get a large number, they'll have a union again. These people are anti-union, and I thank very much for watching, Pat. Someday you got to bring us back again, because I've got a whole page here.
Oh my God, I can't believe the whole half hour is gone.
I'm telling you,
Oh my
Patricia, we don't need guests. You and I could go for a year at least.
But we want to thank everybody for being with us. We'll see you on our next episode of The Good Old Days.
I always leak the inside scoop. I do.
Wow.
Isn't that something? That was a good show.